What I found particularly challenging was um, being at home with my family. I love them very much, but I think it really did affect my mental health to kind of be stuck at home for so long. And, people start to argue and, you get cabin fever almost with each other. So that was pretty difficult to not be able to get away, ever, no personal space, things like that.
The most difficult thing for me during lockdown was the loneliness of being a carer 24 hours a day and never having any respite. I loved my husband very much, but I got to the point I used to go and talk to the plants outside, even if it was raining, or I went and sat in my car on the drive because I just needed to get out of. I've got a beautiful home. I have everything mom would want, but mentally I just couldn't cope with being on call. And because he was very stressed, there was a lot of nighttime talking in the middle of the night. And I found that very challenging.
And I just had my third baby. So he was born on the 12th. So no one was allowed in the hospital. We had to stay in hospital for like 3 days. It was, and then we came out. And then obviously you're not allowed to leave the house or visitors or anything. And then my eldest was off school and my middle one was no nursery and my partner was out of work. So yeah, it was quite tough.
The one thing I struggled with the most would probably be staying motivated and productivity throughout the day, because obviously my mainly routine was going to the library, going to lectures and seminars, classes throughout the day, and then getting home and then having time to relax to myself. But because all of a sudden I wasn't able to go to the library and carry out my normal studying, it was sort of tough because I would sort of, whenever I had free time, I'd just go to sleep. I wouldn't know what to do. It was quite a weird time for me. So that's sort of why I created a routine for myself.
My workload actually increased on the first lockdown as more and more people realised that they needed the sort of help that my company produced. So it was quite busy, quite exciting, and very, very tiring at the end of the day.
I'm a wheelchair user, and one of the challenges for me is that there's where I live, there's not very many areas where I can go wheeling other than walking. And there's just that one section. So when I was going out for my early morning walks, then I'm very limited to only being able to go to that one particular area, which I did find challenging because it meant that I couldn't go anywhere else to go for a walk. So it was always having to go back to the same place, which can be a bit demotivating as well after a while. It's like going to the same place day after day.
What I found challenging was is because obviously I run my own business, so work was, as you can quite imagine, as a key worker, as a lorry driver, the demand went through the roof with deliveries and the demand of customers. But then on the flip side of that, it was also not being at home with the family and worrying about the family, making sure that they are okay, and in a kind of way not being there, supporting them, if you sort of see what I mean. So although I know some people have stayed at home with their families, like the last person just said, I was away pretty much Monday to Friday doing long hours, and by the time I was coming home, and I kind of gathered that they got cabin fever as well. So again, that was playing on my mind and didn't help my mental health, and deteriorated quite sharpish.
It wasn't too bad in many ways. Right at the beginning of lockdown, well, actually just before lockdown was announced, my father-in-law died. And that was a big shock to the family. But I think the hardest thing on all of us was that we had to have a socially distanced and very minimal numbered funeral. There was actually only 8 of us there. And that was really difficult to go into lockdown with, I think, because you then didn't see people to talk about it. You would not normally, you would bump into people in the street, or you'd see them on the school run and they'd go, "Oh, sorry to hear about your father-in-law," or to my husband, "Sorry to hear about your dad." And you talk those things through, and as you talk them through, you process them. And because we weren't seeing anyone, that whole section of grief and loss didn't happen. It was like it was on pause.
Not being able to see mum and dad quite a lot, because they support me quite a bit. So I was like stuck in the flat on my own. So yeah, those things are really the challenges I had. The isolation, really, and lack of social contact during that time.
It's recalibrated for some people their sense of values around wanting to be more family centered, wanting to spend more time with friends. I think that hopefully we'll have a future where people are a bit less economically driven and wanting to just accumulate stuff, and will instead really value experiences and time spent with each other.
I think I hadn't realised how much I'd missed my daughters and the theatre. That was phenomenally difficult because we used to going so often. So yeah, that was horrendous.
Well, not being able to see family members, like my younger siblings, and making sure that they're okay, because talking to your younger siblings on the phone is a lot different from seeing them in person, and I hadn't seen them in quite a few months. So, and obviously a build up to my exams, that sort of messed me up a little bit, because it made me feel a lot worse during lockdown, not being able to see family members.
Also as well, one of the implications about obviously not being physically in a workplace means that you haven't got that buzz, you haven't got that spontaneous kind of meeting up with people and people passing you in a corridor and sort of saying hi.
Because it was sort of hard to keep track of time and hours and stay on top of eating, because I was dealing with depression at the time as well. And so I was always stressed about my exams and my studying, and I'd sort of skip meals, which isn't great. But yeah, so after obviously developing a routine and getting in the habit of eating again, I was able to come out of that situation.
So I checked myself into hospital with a panic attack, and that was the only time that the healthcare profession obviously knew I had Liam, my baby, and was like, "Are you okay?" And that was it. So just one phone call because they saw me check myself in. Diagnosed with depression. That was quite surreal. I've never been diagnosed with that before. But yeah, just learn a bit more about me, I suppose. That I'm not invincible. Anyone can break.
It's probably rewarding and enjoyable was that I got to spend 3 months at home with my family, because I tried committing suicide and was sectioned for 2 weeks, and I got a lot of help from the mental health team as well as my family. So I'd done the garden, completely redesigned the garden, planted loads of flowers, made it all nice and beautiful, and just spent time readjusting back to life, really.
I think I realised I know I am a positive person, but my clients would never have seen that I was struggling, even though sometimes you felt like, do you know what it's like out there when they're moaning that they haven't got their flower or whatever they'd asked me for. But yes, I would say I know I'm a positive person, but I managed to stay positive. Love driving around.
If I was left alone for a long period of time doing nothing, I would just sort of fall into this sort of deep hole, and I'll just keep falling, and I wouldn't be able to come out of it. I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't be productive. I'd sort of have a negative mindset. So yeah, being in a sort of routine, having your head in a good place, and yeah, and getting the right amount of exercise a day.
I think it was also staying positive. I'm quite a positive person. I tend to see the best in things as much as I can, and I don't get bored easily. So I can always find something to do. I've got lots of hobbies, so I think one of my strengths is to always be able to find something to do with myself.
I used all my knowledge of being in the army for 35 years to push me through the barriers that needed to be pushed through, times when I was tired but still had to keep going, and times when you know the light isn't at the end of the tunnel, but you know it's there. I had that strength to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I feel that that sort of training and my positive outlook to life, I know it might sound a bit funny, but I never have negative thoughts at all. I have positive thoughts all the time. And I think that is what enabled me to produce, if I may say, the excellent service that I gave my service users for the whole of the time.
Mainly, the biggest impact I felt was on my education. I was at that time a second-year university student, and it really changed the way I have to study going forward. Looking at the job market, things are very, very different now, and deciding what to do in my future, it's been hugely impacted by the first lockdown and even what's gone on since. And even university right now is very different than what we're used to, and those changes are difficult to adjust to. We're continually assured that things weren't going to be that different. There was going to be a lot of in-person teaching and that we should come back. So, I signed a contract on a house, I'm paying rent. And then when we did come back, I have barely any in-person teaching. So there's the adjustment of learning online and interacting with our teachers remotely, which in itself is different and difficult at times. But then there's also, the financial aspect of it, where as a student, I'm paying a lot of money to live here and be here. Money that I didn't need to spend had we been given a lot of information before. As well as that, all of our exams are also going to be online. We've been told they'll be online this year as well. And that's a very different way to give exams. It's a very different format. So in those ways, it's been challenging.
For me, it was the support I got from my family during my exam period, because during my exam period, it was the first lockdown. I was going under a lot of stress. I knew a lot of my siblings were under a lot of stress as well, because a lot of them live independently. So we were all in lockdown in the same sort of situation, trying to study and dealing with, being on your own for long periods of time. It can get, not great.
If it's okay, if I can just add another part of that, which I think maybe isn't being addressed very much, is also that students are getting a lot of the blame. There's a lot of, rhetoric about how it's very much young people who are at fault and we're throwing huge parties, which in reality, most of us aren't. And we get, there's a lot of, even from our teachers and our parents, we're hearing a lot about it, and it isn't good for students' mental health to continually be told that, we're the reason for this. And of course, there is a minority that are being irresponsible, but most of us aren't. And it's been difficult to kind of deal with that.
Other extreme was when my father was diagnosed with throat cancer during the first lockdown. 5 days a week for 7 weeks, they were driving from where they live to go and have the radiotherapy. And there was, basically what we were told was there was no circumstance really where we could say there was no risk to my dad to see him, so we didn't see them. So my mum was completely and utterly isolated with my father, who obviously, as radiotherapy works, you get iller and iller as the radiotherapy builds over the weeks. They were just locked up in their house, not able to see anyone, and we weren't able to help, and the isolation, I think, for my mum was very, very hard.
And it would take me all day to go to a hospital appointment because I'd have to travel on the train and things. And it's all been telephone appointments instead, and that's been really good. It's made a massive difference for me. It's saved me time. I haven't had to spend a whole day to see a rheumatologist or something.
And actually, there was a sense of the pace of life slowing slightly, which, again, from the perspective of a disabled person for whom everything takes just a little bit longer, and there's a great deal of stress involved around deadlines and you've got to be here by this particular time, was great. You know, like some sources of anxiety actually disappeared for me.
I've had a friend who's a locksmith. He lost his job 3 times because no one's getting burgled, no one's locking themselves out. It's not something I even thought about. So to me, my life didn't change. I got up, you know, went to work, came home, and because I'd been at work and it had been a really stressful day, you know, I had my garden. What if you were stuck in a flat with 2 kids?
I felt very, very lucky that I've got a garden. It's not big, but it's got a lot of flowers in it, and I really enjoy it and find it's really good for my stress levels, and it's been calm, and it's just lovely. Really enjoyed it.
I do a lot of voluntary work, and I found it really enjoyable to be able to get my headspace out of my home and work with other people. And because I didn't have to travel to lots of meetings, which I do quite a lot of, I had more time and energy to focus on helping other people, because I use that as my mental space to help others, to stop myself going on into a deep, dark place, because I did go into a deep, dark place occasionally. And I sat in my greenhouse or my car, and I told myself not to be stupid, and I came back in and I went and did some voluntary work again. So.
I think one of the main things that I think probably goes against the grain of a lot of people is that I enjoyed having the children at home and homeschooling. I know that for a lot of people, their jaws are on the floor and they're scraping them up. You know, when your lives are very busy and you're working and the children have got all their activities, and the older they get, the more they do, the less you see them during the week in many ways. It was suddenly like, oh, this is really lovely. These conversations and these moments that are happening, you know, like we were FaceTiming my mum every morning, their grandma, and doing Joe Wicks's PE sessions together every day, you know, and it was really lovely, you know, things that you just would never have done.
I really appreciated living in a tiny village where, I don't know if I can say this, we didn't stick to 1 walk a day because you never met anyone. From my house, there's 5 walks without, you know, seeing anyone. And as you say, you can walk early morning. And that was my standout moment, is being so lucky to be in a village where I could take my dog out.
So during lockdown, I was constantly finding activities to sort of help me keep at ease. So that enabled me to keep in touch with my creative side. So I got back into drawing because that's one of the things I loved to do as when I was younger. And so I started drawing again. I've actually got one of the drawings with me now. Don't know if you can see, but just sort of things like this. Yeah. So lockdown enabled me to get back in touch with my creative side.
We've done a rockery in my garden. We've built things out of pallets. So we've got a whole seating plan out of pallets. So obviously my partner was on furlough or whatever as well. So he is one of these keep fit people, but he's a quite positive person. So he was, you know, easy to, again, creativity. So I've actually made myself got a puzzle. 1,000-piece puzzle. It's a headache, but I'm nearly there. And I want to make a pom-pom rug. So yeah, it's basically using old back to basic stuff that and not being on the screen. So I've been very conscious about not everyone on the screens all the time, and yeah, just family time, using your mind to entertain yourself.
But I've also done a lot of hobby crafts at home, model making, of model railways that I've built during the time.
I think I embraced the creativity as well. I play a musical instrument, a hammered dulcimer, which is quite an unusual instrument. And when I wasn't working, I spent the time improving my skills on that, and I loved it. Really, really good. And I'm much better than I was in March. So that's a really good positive thing for me.
One of the most enjoyable parts of the lockdown was, I remember one Saturday being very, very hot, and I actually spent the whole day in the garden in my boxer shorts drinking rum. It was absolutely brilliant, and that day will stay with me forever and a day.
I mean, I learnt a lot of new skills during lockdown. I, brushed up on my baking and things like that. And it was nice to have the time to focus on these things and almost take a break from everyday life.
And I got in touch with college friends that I hadn't been in touch with for 40 years. So that is something you wouldn't, lives are too busy. You've never ever had a chance to do anything like that.
As I found that other people were struggling, and so I would make sure that my friends and other people who I hadn't kind of been in touch with for years, that I was reaching out and I was making sure that they were okay. And so that sense of being a social person was a strength even in this situation.
I did. I put a massive statement on one of the social media platforms about everything what I'd got diagnosed with, and the amount of support that I got, particularly from blokes, was that everyone needs to talk about it, really.
I think because of my way of working, the gap in between the lockdowns, I haven't changed hugely what I was doing because I've carried on working from home. I didn't really want to go to coffee shops or the university library to work because you'd have to wear a mask most of the time. It wouldn't be a particularly enjoyable thing to do, sitting there mostly wearing a mask or worrying about people walking too close to you or any of those kind of things. So they didn't, the benefit didn't outweigh the risk of doing it or the enjoyment of doing it. It just wasn't the point. There hasn't been the point of doing it.
So right now I'm feeling a bit more positive in terms of the future, mainly because of there's been a lot of positive news on vaccines in the media and in the news. So there's a lot of promising information based on that. And from dealing with the first lockdown and learning a lot more about myself and how to deal with it, it does make me feel like I'm put in a better position for the second lockdown. And I guess I just know a lot more about myself and how to deal with being alone for a certain amount of time by yourself.
Also to feel in that initial lockdown like disabled people weren't really part of the conversation. There were things in strategies and documents that if you dug down deep enough, you would find things about disabled people not needing to wear masks and things like that. But initially, the focus was very much, and still is actually, predominantly around physically non-disabled people.
Hospital appointments being better over the phone. I'm hoping we can move forward because of my job as well, that people can have those phone-in appointments. They're not always great. I mean, I had a client with a skin rash on their leg, and you can't have a phone-in, but the doctors wouldn't see her, so you're a bit stuck. But yes, if you can have a phone-in appointment, I think in the future, even when we come out of lockdown, that's something to look into.
But lots of people were saying that when the last one ended, we could well see another spike in the winter, and that's happened. So we've almost prepared for it. But I think with talk of vaccines in the future, I think we'll be more prepared for it.
I feel positive. I don't think there is going to be a norm like we used to know it. I think we've all, as a nation, we've all moved forward away from that norm. We've all learned more. We're all a lot better with technology, for instance. I think COVID is here to stay, like the flu. I think it's going to eventually just dissipate slowly, like the flu. And once a year, we'll all be lining up to get the old jab in the arm. But we will keep moving forward as a nation and as individuals. I can only see a new norm, if you like, and a positive norm.
I feel both positive and apprehensive about the future. I feel positive about the technology side of things. I feel positive about how people's ability to adapt and to think about individual needs actually could improve accessibility for disabled people and for people like me. I think that the idea of reasonable adjustment isn't just a concept anymore. It's actually something that people, whether they're disabled people or not, are having to grapple with. In terms of economic policy and the impact that will have on different parts of society, I worry about the future of our education system and the impact of that on our children. I worry about my children's mental health and about what the future looks like for them.
I think one thing I will take forward is not to put as much pressure on myself. There was a lot of, we should be, like I said, I learned new things, but I almost felt like I had to be, and I had to be productive and all of that. And I think I'm remembering this time round that it is sort of unprecedented situation, and it's okay to take a minute and just feel how I'm feeling and take a break and appreciate what's going on.
I'll take forward that trying to help men and women talk more about their mental health, particularly men, because men don't really talk about it with the bravado. And obviously my new hobby that I've got as well, which is sea fishing. So that gets me out, and it's really nice to be out in the fresh air.
I think to tell myself that I can take time for me and not to beat myself up when I get frustrated and upset, that I'm a human being and I'm not a machine. I think at my age, I've grown in my understanding of me, which is quite horrendous to think about as old as I am. I've just learning to live with me as me.